So if you've done any work with me whatsoever, then you'd know that one of the key concepts I talk about when it comes to great leaderships and building great teams is this concept of clarity. And I want to break it down a bit because I feel like it's really misunderstood, if you like. What I want to do is I want to give you two things. I want to give you a couple of questions that you can ask yourself and your team to understand if you need more clarity. And then I want you to understand the kind of 5-step framework that we talk about when we talk about creating clarity. So let's dive in. Firstly, I suppose, what is clarity and why do we need it? Well, the reality is that our teams and our team members have very limited time. At any given point in time, there's probably, 10 or 20 things that they could do, and maybe only time to do 2 or 3 of those things. And this is where clarity becomes really important, because every single moment of every single day, our team members make those decisions. So without clarity, instead of choosing the next most important thing, the next thing that positively impacts our goals or moves us closer to the culture we want, people just tend to choose the next thing. Clarity helps them make better choices every moment of every day so they can be most effective. If we multiply that throughout the members of our team, then all of a sudden, I hope that you can see that we greatly impact our performance and our performance as leaders as well. And this is why I say, outside of some of our emotional intelligence skills, this piece around clarity is one of the greatest things that we can build as leaders. There's a couple of ways we can assess clarity, if you like, or understand its importance. And one of those ways is to ask our team a really simple question. The next time you have your team together, ask them, what are the most important things for us to achieve this year? Like literally say, name me the most 1, 2, or 3 most important things that we need to achieve over the next 12 months, and see how the answers come back. They should come back pretty similar. My guess is that they won't. Ask people to write it down and then get people to read them out and discuss why these are different. Now, bonus points for if you can get really, really similar language. But the reality is this. If we're not all clear to the point where we can articulate the most important things for us to achieve as a team, then it's really hard for us to understand the most important things we need to do every day. So the second question is kind of a hypothetical that I'd like you to consider, and it sort of illustrates why clarity is so important. So the theoretical is this. Let's say it's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and all of your team members need to leave at 5. Now, they've got 2 hours left in the workday. There's probably 20 things that they could possibly do, and only 3 or 4 things that they can actually do in the time frame. So they go ahead and they work, and then at 5 o'clock, you do an audit, let's say, and you go around and you say to everyone, show me the 20 things that you could have done and the 3 or 4 things that you chose to do. Now, when you look at that list from each person, the question is, are you happy with the behaviors, with the tasks, with the priorities that they chose, right? And like I said, this is a really good illustration of why clarity is so important. If people picked, one thing that was great and 2 or 3 other things that they could have left till Monday, then all of a sudden there's a lot of efficiencies that we can find, a lot of ways that we can understand how to improve the performance of our team. So in the second part of this, I want us to think about the 5 pieces of the framework that help us understand how to build clarity. So we've talked about why clarity is important. We've talked about how we assess clarity by asking our team what they feel is the most important thing to focus on. And also thinking of that kind of hypothetical of, if everyone had limited time and chose what they did, would they choose the highest impact things that they could possibly do? So now I want us to understand the nuts and bolts of building clarity. And like most things, it seems really simple in concept, but is incredibly hard to execute. And if we look at the 5 pieces of the framework, we talk about defining what does clarity actually look like, over-communicating, right? Measuring and reviewing, recognizing when people do things really well, and then finally holding people accountable when they're not doing things so well. So let's dive into those. First up is define. And I know this sounds really, really basic, but have you taken the time to actually define what is most important? Have we been through the process? Have we sat down and said, let's look at all the options And let's decide where we're going to focus our time, effort, and energy over the next period of time, whether that's a year or 6 months, or whatever that might be. And that might look like we're focusing on these 3 strategic initiatives, or we're focusing on doing these projects really, really well. But the definition part is just being really clear. It's having the conversation instead of just assuming people know. Now, part of the definition can also be understanding our culture, right? What is the culture we're trying to build? What does that look like in terms of our behaviors? The more clear we can be in definition, the more chance we have of creating clarity down the track. So the second part is over-communication. And the mistake that most people make is they do the definition piece and they think they're done, but they're really only just getting started. So over-communication is about understanding that people think things are important when they hear them over and over again. So the average kind of leader sits down and does the work of defining, and then that's kind of it. They don't really talk about it again. Maybe they put it up on the wall or whatever it is, but they don't talk about it enough. And the reality is that the average person gets about 9.2 million bits of information a year. Now, if we don't populate that information with the stuff that's really important to us and the team and the organization, then people just pick up whatever other information. So over-communicate. So what does that mean? That means talk about it in every meeting. That means weave it into how you give feedback. That means, have the visuals up on the wall and that sort of thing. But mostly it means having conversations about it every day at every opportunity. So the next part is measuring and reviewing. And for some things, this is really easy, right? We have KPIs and maybe you have a great dashboard that measures those all the time. But for some things, it's actually a lot more difficult. So if you were looking at things like customer engagement or staff engagement or anything like that, then you'd know that the measure and review part of that only comes up once or twice a year. So we got to find more creative ways of understanding that. So I had a client once that their main focus, the piece that he really needed clarity around, was improving customer engagement. Now, they only get a customer engagement score twice a year. So instead what he did is every Friday afternoon, before the Friday afternoon meeting, he would ring 5 customers and just say, how did we do this week? Give us a rating out of 10. And he'd take that to the team every week. And that was kind of their proxy for how they were going, if you like. Now, I know that's not a really robust measure, if you like, but it's also just a way to keep people focused, right? Keeps people focused on the outcome. When we measure and review things, people think they're important. So we've got to find a way to do that really, really often. The next one is about recognizing positive behavior. And I know this sounds really, really simple, but the basics of all human behavior, like I always say, is that we seek pleasure and avoid pain. Now, when we're trying to get people to change, when we want them to go out of their comfort zone, we actually need them to do something really difficult, really painful, if you like. And so we have to make that more pleasurable by giving positive feedback. So we give positive feedback so that we reinforce the positive behaviors, but not only with the person. When we do it in front of a group, we reinforce the positive behaviors with the entire team. And now we start to get more traction. And so the final piece is holding people accountable when they're not showing us the behaviors that we need. And, people either do one of 2 things within accountability. They either avoid it completely or they lean right into it. And both of those things aren't always great. So we hold people accountable sometimes by just having the conversation around the results, the behaviors, or whatever it is. But we have to hold people accountable. Now, for the people that really like holding people accountable, one of the problems is that they go directly to accountability without doing steps 1 to 4. And here's the reality. If you haven't done steps 1 to 4, if you haven't defined, over-communicated, measured and reviewed, and recognized when people do things really well, then you haven't earned the right to hold people accountable. So there we have it. They're the 5 steps of creating clarity for your team. Define, over-communicate, measure and review, recognize people when they do it really well, and hold people accountable when they're not doing it so well. If you can master that, if you can do this really, really consistently, then you start to create more clarity in your teams and you start to really influence the behavioral choices that people make every single day about what they choose to do and how they choose to act.